Hey everyone, it's Kresser here. Welcome to another episode of Revolution Health Radio. This week, I'm really excited to welcome Michelle Tam, aka Nom Nom Paleo, as a guest. I can't believe she hasn't been on the show yet. I've been a huge fan of her work and a friend of hers for many years. And I'm just really looking forward to talking to her about her most recent book and just about food in general. She's one of the most knowledgeable people about food and about paleo that I've ever come across, and I love her energy and enthusiasm for it. So I know you're going to enjoy this show. For those of you who aren't familiar with Michelle, she's the co-creator of the Savior Award-winning food blog Nom Nom Paleo. Together with her husband Henry Fong, they've also produced a Webby Award-winning cooking app, authored 2 New York Times bestselling cookbooks, and have been nominated for a James Beard Award. Their newest cookbook is Ready or Not, 150 plus make ahead, makeover, and make now recipes by Nom Nom Paleo. Dubbed the Martha Stewart of Paleo by the New York Times and CBS News, Michelle is the food nerd behind Nom Nom Paleo's recipes and personality. Her obsessions include dark chocolate, trashy reality television shows, and miniature toy food from Japan. Michelle has a degree in nutrition and food science from the University of California at Berkeley and a doctorate in pharmacy from UCSF. For over a dozen years, she worked the graveyard shift at Stanford Hospital and clinics as a night pharmacist before her side hustle became her main hustle. So let's dive in and talk with Michelle Tam. Michelle, it's so fantastic to have you here. I cannot believe I've never had you on the show yet. What's up with that?
I don't know. I feel like I've been on your show because I listen to it all the time.
I feel like you've been on it too. I'm really excited about this. It's going to be a nice break from all the sciencey medicine stuff I'm usually talking about.
That's probably why you don't have me on, because I don't deal with the sciencey medicine stuff.
You retired from that a while ago.
I did. I pretend it didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think it's interesting because these days, especially as we get ready to launch the health coach training program a little bit later this year, I'm just really tuned in to how important, I've always been tuned into this, but I'm even more focused now on the importance of not just food, from the perspective of like why, what we should eat, but actually how to do it, because it's one thing to tell people what to eat, and it's another thing to actually make it possible, to give them that support. And I think you've always focused on that so much in your work, and your first book and now your new book, Ready or Not, 150 make ahead, makeover, and make now recipes is really all about that, isn't it? Just giving people, making it more accessible for people.
Definitely. Like, I think I leave all of this science heavy lifting to you and a bunch of other people who are way smarter and way geekier and love to dive into all of the journal articles, whereas I just focus on the food because I number one, I've been a foodie my whole life, but I didn't really start cooking until I went paleo. And I only started cooking because I realized I couldn't really eat out or get delivery if I was eating paleo. And because I'm so picky, I was like, shoot, I got to get good at this. And what do I do to get better at cooking? I think cooking is a practice, and it's something that you have to work on every day, and you get better with practice. But I think people forget that. And so, with our blog and our book and our app, we really try to make it as simple and, easy as possible. We have a picture for every single step. We have cartoons. We have funny jokes in there. So it's just not intimidating.
Right. Yeah, and I so appreciate that about your work. Kids love your books, love to flip through them, and it makes it really fun and accessible, like I said.
Yeah, that was the secret mission of our books, is to kind of get kids excited about cooking. People are like, when are you going to make a kid book? I'm like, well, these secretly are kind of kid books.
Right.
Because we kind of, and especially with our new book, we tried to make it even more of a kind of a comic book format. But it's really funny because I got an email this morning from someone who's like, I'm a longtime reader, and I noticed you had a poop emoji in your book, and I was not super happy about that. I'm like, I'm sorry, but we did that on purpose because our kids, our 2 sons, love it. And every kid who has seen that page just thinks it's the funniest and most taboo thing. And, we're going to keep that.
Well, yeah. And I mean, there's the book Everybody Poops, which is a must have on every shelf, every kid's bookshelf, right?
Totally. It's the best. It's the best book.
You got to just get over that, whoever wrote that, with all due respect.
Right. No, I understand where she's coming from. I think she's like, to be respectable. I'm like, no, I'm not looking for respect.
Yeah, you gave that up with the whole pharmacy thing, huh? No, but of course now, so I want to talk actually a little bit more about kids, but let's leave that for a second, because I think kids and paleo is something you also have focused on. You have 2 kids yourself, and unlike me, when Sylvie was our daughter was born, she was born into paleo, so we didn't have the
you were
difficulty.
lucky.
I was
smart.
lucky. No, lucky is pretty much what it comes down to, And so we didn't have to go through that whole transition thing. So I want to come back to that because I know that's really challenging for parents, and that you have an interesting experience, because I think for one of your kids it was easier than the other. So I'd love to chat about that. But first, let's just maybe talk a little bit about some of the most important things you've discovered in your work helping people to learn to cook for themselves and cook, healthy, nutrient-dense, paleo type of food. Because you've been doing this for a while now. You have, as you said, a couple different books and an app, and you're out and about talking to people a lot. So what are some of the biggest factors that you've determined make a difference for people when they're taking this on, especially if they're coming from a background like many Americans now, where they don't even know how to cook an egg. Like they've never cooked, and it's terrifying for them to step into the kitchen and try to do this.
Totally. And it's so funny because people say, like, food television is the most popular it's ever been. But, people actually cooking is probably at the lowest it's ever been.
Wow, that's so interesting. It's like a voyeuristic thing, huh?
Right. And I think people love food, and it brings back all these memories, but actually doing it is a totally different thing. And so I totally understand, because I love, food porn and watching all these, awesome food, documentaries and stuff. And I love going out to eat. And so I think for most people, it has to be really visual and really easy. And I think, the recipes have to be super well tested, so that all of their time and energy and money that has gone into cooking actually results in something delicious, at least, delicious enough so that they'll do it again. Because I know myself, like I have tons and tons of cookbooks, and I will pick a recipe and I'll buy all these expensive ingredients and it'll take forever. And then the end result won't be delicious. And I'm like, forget it. I'm never going to cook again. Like that was such a waste of all of my resources.
Yeah, I'm the same. We're the same way. And I just, it's a bummer to spend all that time and energy and then for it to not come out well. And I'm likely to just not go back to that. And sometimes even to that cookbook author. I mean, I like to give people a chance, but I totally know what you mean.
And so I think that's what we have always tried to do. I mean, for me, like my husband is, he's the guy behind all of the visuals and the cartoons and the photos and the layout. But my whole concentration is I want it to taste really, really good. And to make it really, almost foolproof for people to kind of get through the recipe. Mm-hmm. And I think, having a blog and having instant feedback really forces me to do that. And so I think that's just what we've done. I think as we've kind of, been, we just did our second cookbook, but like with the second cookbook, we really did want to make sure that every single step had a picture, and that it's fun and it's not crazy and intimidating, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And I tell people you should totally use shortcuts when you can. And I try to tell people which ingredients have umami, because that'll naturally make your food taste better.
Well, let's just stop right there, because I think there are probably a few people listening to this who've never heard that word, or who've maybe heard it and don't know what it means.
So umami is the fifth taste besides sweet, salty, bitter, and I think I did all
sour.
Sour, yes. So it's that other taste, that indescribable deliciousness or savoriness.
Savory.
Sometimes it's called meatiness, but it's basically it's the ingredients that make your food taste delicious. So like tomato paste has a ton of umami, bacon has tons of umami, like most meats have lots of umami. Um,
Mushrooms.
yes, dried mushrooms especially have a lot of umami, fish sauce. And so these are things that I stock in my kitchen because you just add a little bit and it'll just make everything taste better. And, they have this institute in Japan where they study umami, and they've discovered that if you combine ingredients with umami, it exponentially increases like the deliciousness. And so I use that to my advantage. Like in most of my recipes, there's always fish sauce, and I'll throw in some tomato paste or something extra just because it adds so much flavor. And I think if people just knew these shortcuts, things, and as they practice more and feel more comfortable cooking, that they'll just it'll become second nature. It's not like I love cooking. Like people assume I love cooking, and people reach out to me and like, hey, would you like to do this like pop-up? And I'm like, no.
Absolutely not.
No, I love to eat. And if you want to do a pop-up, I will show up. But I cook to kind of feed my family.
Yeah.
But it's not like this passion.
Yeah.
It's out of necessity.
Yeah. And if you're going to do it, you do it well. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, you love to eat, as you said before. So that's why you needed to learn to cook, because no one was cooking the food that you then understood that you needed to eat. And that's a really good reason to learn to cook, is just to be able to nourish yourself and feed your family and do it in a way that's enjoyable. And I love that about your book, because I think you hit on a really important point, which is, I think about it in a similar way to like, if someone's trying to lose weight, we know that if you rely on willpower alone, it's not going to be very successful. What you really have to do is change your environment. So, for example, you shouldn't have a bunch of junk food in the house, because at the end of the day, when you're tired and you've been at work all day and been making a lot of decisions, and you're experiencing what we call decision fatigue, and you get home and there's a big bag of potato chips there or a pint of ice cream in the freezer, chances are you're going to eat it, And
yeah, I've been in that position.
We all have. So, but I think with cooking, it's like what you just said is so true. It's a lot about setting up your environment for success. Like if you have the umami flavorings nearby and you have some of the right kitchen tools that make things easier, which I want to come back to, and you have the right ingredients on hand, you can put something together with, in a relatively short period of time with not very much effort, and it will still taste good. But if you haven't done that preparation and you haven't created that environment, then it's going to be hard.
Yeah, I think that's also something we tried to address in our new book. So, I mean, it is called Ready or Not because we wanted it so that no matter what state of readiness you're in, you should be able to find something that you can cook. I mean, obviously the best position would be where you're kind of ready, where you've set aside a day where you've made a bunch of sauces or you've made some proteins that you can kind of, remake in a bunch of different ways throughout the week. But there are tons of days when you're not ready. And so we have a whole section in our book where everything can be made in about, I would say 30 minutes, but realistically it's probably 45 minutes from start to finish without any pre-made ingredients, just so there are no excuses. Like we try to say our cookbook is kind of the no excuse cookbook, because even if you don't know how to cook, there's step-by-step pictures for every single recipe. Yeah. If you have no time, we have recipes for that. If you are a meal planner, we have meal plans for you. So there should be no excuse.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm looking at this section now, which is like, it's basically a recipe for your kitchen. Like what do you need to have in there? Plants, animals, healthy fats, fermented stuff, flavor boosters, which, a lot of which are the umami ingredients that we talked about before. And then, some of the tools that make things a lot easier. Like, we have to talk a little bit about the Instant Pot, which I think is now just like blown up beyond. I think it just went nuts in large part because of you. Have they like hired you as an ambassador or given you some equity in their company or what?
No, I mean they've sent me Instant Pots before, and then
Mhm.
I'll reach out to them and say, "Hey, I'm doing this giveaway. Can you send one to these people because I don't want to send stuff
Yeah.
myself."
Yeah.
But I think I just get really excited about things and then I want to tell people about it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened with the Instant Pot. Like I had a traditional stovetop. Like people think the Instant Pot is some magical thing, but really it is just an electric pressure cooker. I mean, it
Yeah.
does other things, but I only use it as an electric pressure cooker. And that's all I recommend people use it as, because I think there are better slow cookers out there, but if you can slow cook something, you might as well do it under pressure because it's faster and it'll taste better. And I think I used to have a stovetop pressure cooker, and I was like telling my sister, who was an actual chef, I was like, this is amazing. Like, you can make like oxtails and all these like cheaper brazen cuts, like faster and tastier. But it's kind of a pain because I have to like babysit it on the stove. She's like, oh, you should get an electric pressure cooker. I'm like, what? And so she told me about hers, and she actually didn't have an Instant Pot. She had another brand. And I'm someone that really likes to do my research on like, the best rated for the
Hmm.
best price, because I was raised by, thrifty Chinese immigrants. And so I went to a site that I really like, because I was pressure cooking, called hippressurecooking.com. And so she had like, I think she's always reviewing different pressure cookers, and she reviewed the Instant Pot. And I was like, wow, this looks pretty cool. And I looked on Amazon and the reviews were good. And it had like a stainless steel insert, which was something that was different from other electric pressure cookers. I'm like, oh, this sounds pretty cool. It's well rated. The price is right. And so I bought one, and then I was like, wow, this is amazing, but the interface is terrible. So I
Hmm.
think I have to show people how to use this thing. But I just thought it was such kind of like a life-changing device. Like I also used to love sous vide, and I know
Yeah.
you were one of the original sous
I,
videers too.
I was until I blew that for everybody with the.
No, I know, with your like the plastic might not be so good. I'm like, oh shoot. Like I don't think I can use this as much as I would like to.
Yeah.
And so then the Instant Pot, because I think everyone loves slow cookers and the
Yeah.
whole idea that you can kind of throw stuff in, set it, and forget it. And
Yeah.
with an electric pressure cooker, you can do the same thing, but it cooks faster. And even if you're not around, like it'll keep it warm, but it doesn't overcook it like a slow
Yeah.
cooker does.
Yeah, that's the big difference. I mean, I've used slow cookers for years, and so I was like, when I first heard about the Instant Pot, I think from you and also Stefan Guillenet was an early adopter. I was like, big deal, it's a pressure cooker, It's and then when I got it, I mean, we use that thing every day, and it's like for everything from cooking vegetables like kale, it makes it really tender.
And
We
fast.
fast, and yeah, you just set it and forget it, to like carnitas. I saw you just published a Instant Pot carnitas recipe, and so we've done that as well. And I mean, it's just one of those game changing devices.
Like soup, we have soup all the time just because
Yeah.
it's so fast. I can dump
Yeah.
in a bunch of vegetables. I can have something cooking while we're sleeping, when
Hmm.
I run out. I mean, I think it's just great.
Absolutely. I mean, and that makes a huge difference. That's the difference between you having like a hot finished meal when you get home and not. And then, calling for takeout that you probably don't really want to eat or shouldn't eat because there's nothing ready.
And you can save money. Like people are always like, oh, it's so expensive to be paleo. But now you can buy the cheaper brazen cuts and
Yep.
they will turn out amazing.
So delicious. They're more flavorful in many cases than the lean cuts, of course, because of that fat. Yep.
So you don't have to
Yeah.
buy all that
Yeah.
powder.
Win, 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 win for sure. So what other kitchen essentials, would you put high on the list? Like if you're a desert island, what would you take with you along with your Instant Pot?
So the Instant Pot could do many things. I mean, obviously I like my cast iron skillet. So I actually tried with this new book to not put any crazy stuff because yeah, there's tons of amazing stuff that's coming out all the time. But I think rimmed baking sheets I love just
Hmm.
because you can roast vegetables and you can roast, meats. But I think the game changer to combine with the rim baking sheet is to have a stainless steel wire rack
The
because
rack.
it will elevate stuff. It doesn't get soggy.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have like a convection oven that has a fan that circulates all of the hot air, by just elevating the food, I think it makes it taste better. And it's funny is they didn't have stainless steel wire racks until pretty recently.
Yeah.
Because I think I first found one only at like a specialty store. I'm like, this is amazing. Now, like I can scrub them and throw them in the dishwasher, and it won't flake off like the chrome or nonstick ones. But now you can totally find stainless steel wire racks everywhere.
Yeah, we have a bunch of those too. Like I think you do this as well, but it's a great way to cook bacon. Is to so the bacon's not just getting super soggy in the bacon grease. It actually falls down under the rack. And then I know you have the recipe for mock wings where you use the racks in the dish. So that's super. We use those a lot too. And I agree that's really, it's got to be really high on the list. So we got Instant Pot. We've got the rimmed baking sheets and the racks. Good knife has got to be up there.
And then people always say, like, which knife? I'm like, you actually, that's one where you need to go and like go to a store and pick one up.
Yeah.
Because one might be really well rated, but people's hands are different and it just has to feel right in your hand.
Like a tennis racket or something.
Right. Because I have some which are really highly rated, but my hand isn't super big. And so it's really unwieldy when I use those knives.
Right.
What else do I love? I have some kind of lame things that I like. Like, I really like my hot water kettle.
Yeah.
Like the electric
that's
one.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have one where you can set the temperature?
I do.
Yeah, I have that
I
too.
splurged and like I got a mid-range one, and then I splurged and got the Breville, and I like that one a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a coffee aficionado, so having the right temperature for the pour over is super important.
Henry is as well, and so we have like a nicer burr grinder, but like coffee, it really makes me a little too jittery, so I don't drink it as much as I used to. And then I also think a good convection, I guess it's technically a toaster oven, but they call them countertop ovens now.
Yep.
I love. And the convection ones, they say, are better than air fryers. And air fryer is kind of like the new, like, cool appliance. But the convection, toaster ovens work much better. Yeah. And I feel like I'm always using my oven, and then I can use my toaster oven, just because for whatever reason, I don't mind cleaning up a rimmed baking sheet as much as I mind cleaning pots and pans. And I don't know why that is. Like, I don't think it's that much more. I just hate it. And so if I can throw it on like a sheet pan, I will roast it.
We do the same thing. I mean, almost every meal we're using both ovens. Like we often, if we're roasting a piece of meat, for example, on a low temperature, and then we want to have some asparagus or, something that we also roast, then that goes in the small convection countertop oven. I agree, that would be definitely in my top 5 too.
And then I love, tongs I use a lot, and silicone spatulas I use. Oh, my meat thermometer I think is probably my favorite thing.
Just about to ask you about that. Do you have a Thermapen, or what do you like?
I have a Thermapen. They have these new MK4 Thermapens, which is like it is an improvement on their classic one, because I think it like goes to sleep, but as soon as you touch it, it lights up. It's backlit.
I got one of those too. I had a beef with Thermapen because we had 2 or 3 of the earlier versions, and they all broke and stopped working, and
they're expensive.
They're expensive. Yeah, I mean, we sent it in. At least they were good about it. They replaced them, but then the last one that you were talking about, Mark IV, is such a big improvement for the reason you mentioned. It turns on automatically, and you don't have to close it and open it to turn it on again, which is always a pain. And for those that don't know about them, they're instant read. So if you put them in a piece of meat, they immediately tell you the temperature instead of having to wait a few seconds, which can make a difference if you really care about how your meat is cooked. So those are great. And
I think it's more important, like when you're cooking kind of delicate things or expensive cuts. But if you're using your Instant Pot and using braising cuts, you don't need it.
Yeah, I use it for grilling mostly, and then sometimes in the oven. What about a nice Dutch oven, like Le Creuset or something?
Those
like
are great.
That?
I mean, I think there's always the two really fancy ones are like Le Creuset and Staub. But Lodge makes a really good one for a
Yeah.
good price, like way cheaper, but they do chip. Because I did buy a Lodge. I was like, wow, this is like $200 cheaper.
Right.
But then when I actually used it, I'm like, oh, look, I just chipped it. So I think that the more expensive ones, they are an investment, but I think they have lifetime guarantees.
Yeah.
And like the ones I've had for like 10 years without
Yeah.
any problems.
So we had a Le Creuset. We have a lot of Le Creuset stuff because I just, I don't spend money on like partying or, a lot of other things that people spend money on. So I'm like, I'm going to treat myself right when it comes to kitchen stuff. And because we spend so much time in the kitchen. And we had a skillet for like that we've had for at least 10 years. Because I think I had it even before I met Elan, we've been together for almost 15 years. So it was around for a long time, and the coating started to come off, and I sent it into Le Creuset and said, this coating's starting to come off. And they were like, oh, sorry. And they sent us a brand new one. It's just, after 15 years, it was like, wow, that was incredible. Yeah. So, I mean, even though they are more expensive, it's the type of thing you could have for a lifetime or, many, many years. So
I think they're depending on you to like get off your butt and package it and send it.
Right.
Which is a limiting factor for many people. But I think when you spend that amount of money, you're like, no, it has to stay forever.
Yeah. Okay. So that's great. I think that will be helpful for people because, often people are just getting started. They don't know really where to apply their resources. What's the best place to spend the money that they have budgeted for this. And so I think
But I'm also like you, like I don't spend money on anything else. Like I only spend money on food and kind of things related to food. But like my clothes are super
places
old.
To go that have different kinds of food to eat.
Yeah, no, I will do that. But like travel. I don't buy fancy clothes. I don't buy fancy bags. Like I'm like, Like I think my kids are embarrassed by like how I dress. They're like, Mom, are you wearing your pajamas? I'm like, kinda. Like
Yeah. I think we can agree on that. There's not much. We're both pretty food focused. Okay, let's go back to kids because that's a question I get a lot from my patients. People who know that they need their kids. I have unfortunately a lot of kids as patients who are dealing with behavioral and mood disorders. ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, sensory processing disorder, on the autism spectrum. Growing number of kids dealing with even obesity and diabetes and autoimmune disease. It's really heartbreaking. And the parents know that diet is a major contributor and they want to, make the change. Maybe they've even made the change themselves, but they're still like cooking separate meals for their kids.
I was doing that.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that transition.
So, Henry and I both went paleo in like 2010. But I don't think we kind of got the kids on board until 2000, when Ollie, probably a year later. And it was only because, and I've heard this story from so many other people. It's like, we made something separate for the kids, but I would not eat the leftovers. And it actually made me really sad. And I was like, why am I feeding something to them that I won't eat myself? Like, that's not okay. Yeah. And I hate making a separate meal because I'm lazy. So we're going to just have one family meal, just like my mom did. Because like my mom never made us something different or separate. Yeah. And we just ate what she made, but here we are giving our kids a choice. And, I understand it's hard. Like no one wants a fight at the dinner table. Like you're tired, everybody's tired and everyone's overscheduled. But I think we just made this pact that this is what we were going to do. But we did kind of compromise in that everybody had to agree on what we were eating. Whereas before I'd be like, I'm going to make this super spicy, weird, whatever for Henry and I. And then you guys can have like your whole grain nuggets or, So now like everything that I cook and everything that's like on the blog or in our books are all tested on the family. I mean, obviously if it's a spicy thing, we'll tone it down for the kids. But we just opted to do that. But we also didn't want to go super crazy about it because I think Henry did try to do it because my younger son is very picky. And he was, I think, 3 at the time that we kind of got them on board, 3 or 4. And so he'd had all sorts of delicious, bad, processed foods until then. And he didn't understand why we couldn't have that anymore. And this is back when I was still working nights. And so I was sleeping during the day. And I was like, I don't know how we're going to get Ollie on board. And Henry was like, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And so I guess while I was sleeping during the day, he decided he was going to just have like cold turkey. We're just going to do what, eat paleo.
Yeah.
And I think he had this kind of standoff with our younger son. He's like, well, if you don't want to eat, or, you live under a roof, so you have to do what we say. And so my younger son, like, literally got up and said, well, I'm not going to live here anymore. And he, like, ran outside, slammed the door. Yeah. And he's like, huh. And he actually was, like, not eating anything. And so Henry was like, okay, we got to figure out how this works. So for him, we had this bridge where we knew that he loved scrambled eggs and he liked roasted broccoli. And so there's this really great children's book called Bread and Jam for Francis that's, I think, from the late 60s. And it's about this little badger who tells her mom, who makes wonderful meals, that all she wants to eat is bread and jam. So the mom says, okay, I'll give you bread and jam for all of your meals, and we'll eat what we're going to eat. And so eventually she got tired of it. And so we were like, well, we'll make scrambled eggs and roasted broccoli his bread and jam because we're okay with it. And it's not super hard to make. And he eventually kind of got sick of eating the scrambled eggs and broccoli. Yeah. And so now he eats what we eat. I mean, he eats super slow, like at mealtime, but he finishes it. And so I think that's just his way of kind of exerting his
protest.
Yes. And of course, when he goes to my mom's house, who now also kind of cooks paleo for the kids, he will eat super fast just to kind of, needle me a little more, like, wow, when Paul makes me food, I eat really fast. I'm like, well, that's great. Like, yeah. But I think before I used to stress out about what the kids ate because I wasn't kind of taking full responsibility for what they were eating. But now that I know that I make their breakfast, I pack their lunches, I make their dinners. So I'm in charge of probably 85% of what they're eating. And I'm very happy with how they're eating 85% of the time. I'm in control. So when I'm not in control, I let them kind of make their own decisions and I don't freak out if they, eat non-paleo stuff. But my younger son does have, I suspect the two of us have celiac, but because I went paleo before I actually tested myself, I can't say that I am, but I know that I have the gene and he has the same exact symptoms I do. Yeah. And so we both just avoid it. And he's really good about self-regulating. And I think that if you model good behavior, you'd be surprised at what your kids, follow and pick up.
Yeah, that's been pretty interesting to me with Sylvie because she, we had a little bit different experience because, as I said, when she was born, we were already eating paleo, and she just came into that, and we never had any separate meals. She from day one, she was eating cod liver oil and liver when she was a kid. Her first solid food was an egg yolk, and then after that it was liver. And it was amazing.
So all new people who haven't had children yet, this is what you should be doing.
This is what you do.
Yes.
However, of course, now she's 6.5 years old and she's out in the world. And it's not like, it was so much easier in a way when she was up until like 2 or 3 because we had complete control over every single thing that went into her mouth. She was just home, mostly with us and wasn't going to if she went to birthday parties, she wasn't as outwardly focused on what other people were eating. And now she is, and of course she's been exposed to the kinds of foods that other kids eat. And, a few things about that. Number one, it is interesting, like when a kid grows up eating mostly real food or gets accustomed to that, I think their palate changes, just like ours does when we don't eat sugar. And when she, sometimes, we let her eat, like if she goes to a birthday party, we tend to, if it doesn't have any gluten in it, we will sometimes just say, yeah, go ahead and eat that. And she'll often take a few bites and go, ew, this is just like so sickly sweet. I don't like it. And so we end up bringing something for her. But there are also times when she really, wants to eat something that we don't really particularly want her to eat. And I'll admit, for me, it's been a little bit of a struggle and a learning experience. I'm still learning to let go and just be easy with it. Because what I definitely don't think is good for kids or adults for that matter is a really kind of obsessive focus on it. Because if you,
because they're going to sneak it.
Absolutely. They start sneaking it. They start lying about it. It's a control thing. Like you mentioned, the protest, like a way of, using food to then kind of assert their will. And I just don't want her to have that kind of relationship with food.
Yeah. I also think like we have talked to them about, how the food affects them and actually to notice. Cause I know like back when we weren't really sure how sensitive Ollie was to gluten, like we're like, oh, well, let's make sure he has a good breakfast. And then if he eats like this cake or whatever later, he'll be fine. But he would eat it and then he would have like this sudden meltdown, or, his stomach wouldn't hurt. And so we'd be like, hey, look, like isn't this like this just happened, 2 hours after you ate it. It's probably related to that. And you don't normally feel this way when you eat other foods. And so I think he recognizes that, there are direct consequences from eating certain foods. And I think he sees in his classmates that, there are a lot of, I didn't notice it when I was growing up, but I notice it a lot more just helping out at the schools. There really are a bunch of kids who just, they are on the spectrum, or they can't sit still and they can't focus. And a lot of it is related to, obviously there are lots and lots of other factors, but, part of it is how they are being fed. And I think that their parents really are trying to do their best, and they've been told a certain thing from their caregivers and their doctors. And it's just a hard thing.
Yeah. There's a whole spectrum there. There's people who are trying, and then there's people who are just not aware at all. It's not even on their radar. We were just on a trip and we went in for breakfast, and there were a couple of kids sitting next to us, and they were eating Frosted Flakes and donuts was their breakfast. And Sylvie looked over, and she actually mentioned something. She's like, Papa, they're not going to feel very good after this breakfast. So, we've talked to her a lot about that too. And she's also aware of how foods affect her. And it's painful when I see that, because my guess, of course, I don't know, those kids might be fine, but my guess is they have some health issues, and they're, in my mind, that's so obviously connected, right? But I think a lot of parents are not actually making that connection between what their kids are eating and how they're behaving.
But it is also a really hard thing to do, right? Like if there are so many convenient foods that you can quickly buy and are packaged, and they're all labeled and they say they're healthy and there's whole grains, you know what I mean? And they're packed with like, DHA or whatever, you know what I mean? And so it's just easy for people to do that. Whereas to, start cooking all your meals and doing meal prep, and it's a hard thing to do. Like I totally understand, but it is super important.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's, again, just coming back to your focus. I think the message I've always gotten from your work is it doesn't have to be hard. You do have to put in some effort, and especially in terms of preparation. But once you have done a lot of that preparation, it can be surprisingly easy and also fun. Like, you can get the family involved. There are often pictures of your kids in your books, like preparing food with you, which is really cool to see.
There are lots of pictures of my kids in my book, because I think families like seeing, that families are doing this. But my kids don't really help out that much. Like they help out a little bit, but not really. Like they eat everything, but they're not super
That's their
excited
job.
about cooking.
That's their job. Actually, it's interesting. And that's just varies from kid to kid too, you know, Sylvie was gone through phases that way. Like there was a time where I couldn't do anything in the kitchen without her wanting to do it. You know?
Oh yeah. When they're littler, I
Yeah.
felt like they did, but now that they're older,
Yeah.
they're like, eh.
Yeah. They got other stuff going on. And that's, you know, that's as it should be. So anything else that you feel like people who are maybe somewhat new to cooking or feeling a little overwhelmed by it all?
I think
should
one
know?
thing that we always tell, like, especially if you have kids, like with our book, because it's like bright yellow and bright red, and it's filled with pictures and cartoons. Like, if you don't know how to get your kids interested in this kind of food, just check out the book from the library. Like, you don't even, I mean, obviously it would help if people bought my book, but don't even buy my book. Go to the library and check it out, and then just leave it on the coffee table. And kids will just be attracted to the book just because there's a big cartoon on the cover. And once they start flipping through the pages and kind of seeing the pictures of the food, like that is one of the biggest things that I've, like in terms of feedback that I've gotten from parents and families who weren't sure how to get like their kids interested in real food, is that they just put a book down and without saying, you need to read this book, this is how I want us to eat, just leave it there. And they start flipping through it and they're like, wow, this looks good. Can we make this?
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of secretly gets them interested. And then I think when it's their idea that they want to make something or try something, they're way, or at least if it's in their mind that they came up with the idea that they wanted to do it, they're way more open to trying it.
That's for sure. I love this section too, the emergency SOS recipes. Those are, you know, paleo fast food. So let's talk a little bit about that, because when people hear like, oh, it's going to be 45 minutes or an hour, they get home, they're, you know.
No, it doesn't have to be that hard. Like it can just be like, I almost feel like, okay, so one day you may have to make something ahead of time, but like if you make my Kahlua pig, which is just a big pork shoulder that shreds and you can freeze it, like you can fry it up and it turns into like carnitas, and you can throw it on lettuce wraps or, you know, grain-free tortillas. And we call them like left tacos because we're using leftovers to make tacos. You know, there's just lots of different ways to make your leftovers exciting. You know, we have a whole section on different sauces that you can put on things, different salad dressings. But if you have like we always have lettuce in some form in our refrigerator and a bunch of raw vegetables that can be quickly turned into a salad. And then you just throw on some leftover protein and you have dinner. It really doesn't have to be that hard. And then, you know, if you want to get a little fancier, you could do something like Ollie's crackling chicken, but that is not even fancy. It literally is chicken thighs. You remove the bone and you can go to your butcher and they can take the bone out for you, and you flatten it and you fry it and the skin gets all crispy and it's super delicious. And there's no crazy technique or any crazy seasoning. It's just knowing that you can fry chicken thighs for a long time to get super crispy skin and the fat underneath kind of renders out. And the meat doesn't overcook because it is thigh meat. And like kids love that. Like Ollie's friends will come over and I'll make Ollie's crackling chicken and nobody bats an eye. They just think it's like fried chicken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how simple it can be, and how simple meals like that can sometimes be the most delicious, because you just, especially if you're getting really good quality ingredients, because the flavors really stand out even more in some cases. Well, cool. I'm really excited that you did this book. We ended up with 3 copies somehow. So I've given a couple away, which is, people have been, those have been very happy people who receive those, and we use the book a lot. And I think it's, you know, both of your books are just kind of must-haves on the shelf if you're interested in this approach to cooking, because they are so accessible. There's so many different levels. You know, if you have more time and more energy, you can really get involved and do some, you know, more detailed recipes. But if it's, you know, 7:30 and you just got home, you can turn to the SOS section and just whip up something that's still going to be really satisfying and nourishing. And, it's the kind of book you can just open to any page and find something good. So thanks for all the work you're doing in making this practically accessible for people and helping them to actually enjoy their relationship with food, because I think that's such a big, I really agree with Michael Pollan and his focus on cooking, and just how if we all cooked, I mean, is there any question whether we'd be in this place where we are now with the epidemic? I don't think we could be with chronic disease. If people just cooked more, we'd be a lot better off. It's so simple when you put it that way.
Right. But it's a pain. I totally understand. And so we try to take away as many pain points as possible.
Absolutely. And tell us a little bit about your app, because we haven't talked about that at all yet. But I love that the app. Yeah, I know that's a whole nother ball of wax. But
well, the app was our first foray into kind of anything besides the blog. And it is only on Apple devices because we self-financed it. And it's really expensive, or at least back when we did it in 2012, it was really expensive.
Yeah.
And we call it kind of a cookbook on steroids because you can swipe through every step. And it's fun. And we update it every time we have a new recipe on the blog. There are kind of app-specific recipes on there. You can, create shopping lists from it. It's not like super dynamic, like, a meal planning app. But, you pay $5.99 price forever, and you just keep on getting new recipes.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. And there are, of course, some people who are like, book? What's a book? So it's good that there's a whole nother way of accessing this. And, a lot of people have iPads in the kitchen now and lots of recipes on them. So it's awesome to have a whole nother way of accessing all of these different recipes. So Michelle, thanks for joining us. Anything in the works now? Are you taking a well-deserved break?
I mean, we're always working on our blog because we're always coming up with new content for that. But no, like Henry's like, hey, are we working on our next book? Because, each of our books takes like 3 years to do because we do everything. But I'm like, no, I'm not even done promoting this latest book. But I know that eventually we'll probably work on a next book. But right now we're just kind of working on our own little mom and pop blog stuff.
Yeah, great. Well, that's fantastic too. And I love all the work that you do there as well. Often share your
And the
posts with
feeling is
people.
mutual. Like anytime anyone ever asks me about any sciencey stuff, I'm like, you should go to Chris Kresser. Like, is cholesterol bad? Like, Chris Kresser has this really great series on that. Like, well, what about my gallbladder? Chris Kresser has something about that. Like,
well, that's great, because anytime anyone has a cooking question, I send them your way. So, and the fact is, more people want to know about that than all the sciencey stuff. So keep doing that work. Well, I think
you give them the reason to actually, cook, because nobody wants to cook. But when you realize that your health depends on it, you're like, okay, well, maybe I should do it.
Maybe I should do it, and maybe I'll figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much, Michelle, again, for being with us. And the book is Ready or Not, 150 plus Make Ahead, Makeover, and Make Now recipes by Nom Nom Paleo. And definitely a must-have. Go out and get it. I assume it's in bookstores and everywhere, Amazon, everywhere else.
Yes, it is. It's everywhere books are sold.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks again, and we'll have you back soon. I really enjoyed this.
Me too. Thank you.
That's the end of this episode of Revolution Health Radio. If you appreciate the show and want to help me create a healthier and happier world, please head over to iTunes and leave us a review. They really do make a difference. If you'd like to ask a question for me to answer on a future episode, you can do that at chriskresser.com/podcast question. You can also leave a suggestion for someone you'd like me to interview there. If you're on social media, you can follow me at twitter.com/chriskresser or facebook.com/chriskresserlac. I post a lot of articles and research that I do throughout the week there that never makes it to the blog or podcast, so it's a great way to stay abreast of the latest developments. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you next time.